Hey, we are back from lunch here in Madrid for the you and the rest of the world. Maybe some of you in like the Americas are just waking up. Welcome back to Hewlett Packard Enterprise Discover. You are watching our live blogger influencer program, and now we're going to have a conversation around storage. And maybe what I'll do first is have you guys introduce yourselves so that you can tell everybody who you are.
My name is Patrick Osborne. I am Director of Product Management and Marketing in the HPE Storage group, and I have a lot of familiar faces here, so good to see everyone. Thanks.
Hi, Vish Mulchand. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, there you go. Vish Mulchand, Director of Product Management as well. Partner in crime with Patrick Osborne, commonly known as the Blues Brothers.
All around great guy.
Wait, are you the Blues Brothers?
Hey, Jake. There you go.
Let me get you your hat there.
All right, excellent. All right, now before I do any more damage, let me give it to Bruce.
Thanks, Vish. I'm Bruce Trevathan, the Group CEO of the Layer X Group based in New Zealand. Customer, HPE, for a long time now, and it's good to be up here with some good friends.
Yeah, and Bruce is an add-on. I say that in an add-on kind of way. I think one of the first customer videos I did was with Bruce in Discover in Vegas, probably about 5-6 years ago. I got to go down to New Zealand a couple of years ago and got to see him in New Zealand. So we seem to always cross paths a couple times a year. And he was out here, told me he was here, so I invited him to come sit in with us because I think he'll have a great story to tell too. So let me start with just real high level to tell you about what our news was. For those of you, how many of you actually heard what the storage news was, or is this going to be like brand new, starting from scratch? So if you know the storage news, I know some of you guys have got it. Okay, so I'm going to just give you a really high level flyby of what it is, and then I'll let these guys talk more of the details, and then we'll turn it over to questions from you guys. So this is not all the news. Oh, great. Come on in. And actually, before we get going, I'll have Rod introduce himself too. So we just started.
Do we have a hashtag for this right now?
What are they using? Coffee Talk or what? HPE Coffee Talk. So one word, HPE Coffee Talk. Yes. So Rod, why don't I have you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure.
And have you move in because there's live streaming and videotaping this.
All right. My name is Rod Bagg. I'm with HPE Nimble Storage. I run the analytics and the customer support teams, meaning InfoSight and then all of customer support for our Nimble Storage products.
Which is a great roll into what the news is. The big news that we announced on November 21st started with InfoSight. And there's some pretty cool functionality with InfoSight around predictive analytics, and the way that I talked about it in the Chalk Talk I did is if you look at kind of the Pareto of problems customers have, 80% of the problems take 20% of the time, and they're pretty easy problems to fix. Pretty easy to diagnose and resolve. And those are the kinds of problems that InfoSight already does today. And what we've just announced is a new predictive engine that's going to take that other 20% of the problem that takes 80% of the time. And we'll definitely have Rod talk more about that and what that means specifically. The other thing that we've done, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody if you've been listening to what we've talked about in storage, is that we were also going to take InfoSight and put it on 3PAR. So those are the two big bits of the news that we've got around InfoSight with the new predictive engine and with support for 3PAR. And we'll talk more about what that means. The couple of other things that we'll probably want to hit on, Cloud Bank storage. Cloud Bank was something we talked about in June at Vegas, at Discover in Vegas. Patrick can tell you more about that. It's basically effectively giving us a low-cost, cloud-based option, object-based storage like an S3, like a Azure, like even a Scality for disaster recovery, for long-term archive of a backup. And Patrick can give us more on that. And then the other bit of news is RMC 5.0. And that's also Patrick's bit. I think the main thing with RMC, it might be good to maybe make sure we make level set and make sure everybody here knows what RMC is. It stands for Recovery Manager Central. Basically, it's copy data management. So it can manage snapshots and moving data from a 3PAR to a backup device like a store once. Has integration with applications like VMware. You can actually do the snapshot from within VMware. You click a button, point it at your 3PAR, say do this backup. It'll take the snapshot from 3PAR, move it to store once, and then can create a synthetic full from the copies. And so there's new features with that now being integrated into 3PAR. And that, yeah, integration with Cloud Bank, and also a new application with Exchange, right? Okay, so that's that's the news. Now we want you guys to kind of talk a little bit more about the details. So I'll turn to Rod first, and you can kind of maybe talk a little bit deeper about the info site. You're the only guy that I've given a slide that can go deeper on the news. And so what I've got, if this thing will go forward, it's the one that shows the 3 layers. Okay, it's not going forward, Jeffrey. Okay. You got to talk into the mic.
All right. So I'll walk through this slide, but there's a lot more to it as well that I can cover. But if you take a look at what we did, we kind of approached this very differently from the beginning in how we collect data, what we collect, and what kind of analytics we're doing on that data. So we realized very early on that it was essential that you collect data from the entire stack. Just understanding what's going on in storage is not enough. The complexity of the infrastructure nowadays and where the issues are not limited to storage. We all know that. There's networking issues, host side issues, hypervisor, application integration, the whole bit. You need to understand everything, and that was the approach we took. It's kind of the analogy would be as if you had a self-driving car, for example, and if the only piece of data you collected were that from the cameras, it wouldn't do a very good job. It's just not possible to understand what's going on several cars in front of you from those cameras alone. You need radar, you need the ultrasonic sensors and everything else in that car. So it's absolutely imperative that you collect more of this information up the stack. Now, what we do with that is feed that into our predictive analytics engine. So again, with what we're trying to do there is learn from the entire install base, from the global visibility from all of our customers. So if one customer has an issue, we want to learn from that, understand it, and make sure nobody else hits that same issue. It's similarly back to the same car analogy. If the only thing it ever learned about how to drive was from a single driver, and that driver wasn't very good, that would not be a very good thing. And so you need the global visibility so that you can protect everybody else. So that global visibility in our predictive analytics feeds into our new AI recommendation engine. So this is what Kelvin was talking about, where the 80% of the issues kind of represent 20% of the pain. The long tail beyond that, though, is the other 20% of the issues that represent 80% of the pain. And those are the very complex issues that we're trying to resolve with that AI recommendation engine. So let me sort of give you an example there. If you're really trying to solve these tougher issues, you have to understand not only what's going on in the environment, but very much what the necessary steps are to resolve those issues. So it's not just an answer about this is the issue you hit. It's understanding the probability of what is the right recommendation to make. Because any one issue might have several recommendations on what the right steps are to resolve it. For example, if it's a performance issue, you can always throw more hardware at it. That's a typical resolution to that sort of an issue. But that's not what we're trying to do. That's a last resort for us. We're trying to optimize that environment with other resolutions, maybe setting QoS policies automatically or shifting workloads. So that's important when we're talking about the AI recommendation engine. Finally, all of this is really sort of driving several customer outcomes. The first one is support automation. We've been doing this for years. It's how we started. It was what we were intending to do, was to transform that support and experience for enterprise level support. So at Nimble Storage, for example, we have no level 1 or level 2 support engineers. It's all level 3. Okay? And that's because that early part of that problem, the 80% that caused 20% of the pain, we've automated all of those resolutions. We know they're coming. We can tell the customers before they hit them what they need to do to avoid them. That relieves us from the L1, L2 break-fix model. So all we have is level 3. The next thing is the cloud portal. So this is our proactive management portal where we have planning tools, various other troubleshooting tools for customers to go in there and understand what's going on in their environment. And then finally is the continuous improvements that we make by telling engineering and informing them of what's going on in the install base so that we can make the product better. That might be making it better by improving the performance of the product, improving the reliability and availability of the product, but also the user experience. Everything we learn in the support center feeds back into engineering, literally with every engineering team in the building once a week. We feed back what we've learned. That helps to improve that product. And then finally, I've already talked about the preemptive recommendations. That's an absolutely essential part of what we're building now with InfoSight.
So Vish, let me turn to you and let's kind of continue the InfoSight on 3PAR and talk a little bit about what we're doing and kind of the time frame, because I know one thing we don't want people to walk away with is to think that InfoSight on 3PAR, now it's like 100% and we're done, run circles around the building. So let's talk a little bit about what customers are going to get with this first release and what's it going to look like for a 3PAR customer.
Okay, great, Calvin. So 3 things on this first release of InfoSight for 3PAR. The first is in the area of cross-stack analytics, as Rob mentioned, sometimes known as VM vision, where you can very easily pinpoint where, for example, if you have an application slowdown on a VM, where that latency attribution is. Is it in the host stack? Is it in the storage stack? So it helps you very quickly and easily pinpoint. So that's the first piece, cross-stack analytics. Second piece is around global visibility, capacity, predictive analytics, performance trending. There's also best practices information. For example, if your initiatives are unbalanced on a host-facing port, it'll point that out. If you're at the wrong or missing critical patches, it will point that out, right? So you get that global visibility. And then the third piece is putting in place a foundation for some of the support automation pieces that Rod talked about as well. And I think there are 2 elements there, right? One is clearly the collecting of the data, the sensor data is very key as the infrastructure scales and the fine-grained data that you have to collect and store. Second is, I think, bringing some experts, data science experts, to look at the data, look at the signatures, make some forward predictions based on those signatures, right? And that's the third piece here that we are going to put this foundation. And one of the reasons why we've been able to do support of InfoSight on 3PAR in relatively quick order is 3PAR already has a very rich foundation of telemetry data. So the first step in collecting the sensor data was somewhat there already. Now we've applied a lot of the data science techniques that Rod talked about. Now in terms of availability, you'll find that for the cross-stack analytics, it'll require the latest version of the operating system and the service processor. But all customers with an active support contract will be able to get access to InfoSight. Now, for those of you that have used Storefront Remote in the past or have known about that, we've brought that functionality into InfoSight as well. So all customers on all versions with active connections will get that InfoSight functionality, and then 3.3.1 for the cross-stack analytics.
So just to elaborate on one point, and I think it's extremely key that Vish had made, where we're trying to apply those same kind of learnings and analytics and so on into the 3PAR stack, and that's where we've sort of built that foundation so that we can do the case automation. One of the key things that not a lot of people know about, we don't talk about it as a part of the product or anything else, but it's absolutely one of the key parts of the secret sauce to why Nimble has been so successful with InfoSight and our predictive analytics. And that is a team that we formed in our support organization called Peak. So this is a team of people. Right now in our organization, there's 14 of those people. They're aligned with different functional areas of the product. So there's a guy who's an expert in performance, one in networking, fiber channel, operating system, file system, so on and so forth. They're paired with an engineering cohort from product development. And what those guys on the Peak team's responsibility are is 3 very simple things. So number 1, If you have they do they analyze every case in their areas and every bug. And if there's a case or a bug that's created, the question is, why did that happen? What could we have done differently to avoid that case altogether, or what do we need to do to make sure we don't see those kinds of cases again? So that's essentially driving cases to zero, one way or another. Okay. Second thing that they're responsible for is if you have to have a case, how do you automate it in a predictive manner, meaning hopefully we can identify it before it happens to the customer, create a case automatically, and send a resolution of steps so that they don't hit that issue. Or if they have hit it, send them the corrective measures so that they don't hit it again. That's number two. So if you have a case, how do you automate it end-to-end with a prescriptive solution back to the customer? Third thing, if you have to have a case that has to get handled by a human being, how do you make that case take 20 minutes or less, period? So we're not there yet with Nimble, but for us, the average effort required to solve any case is 47 minutes. That's what we're after. And so when you set a goal for 20, that's what you have to do. That's the mentality you need to think. That same team has been formed for 3PAR. They are modeling it exactly after what we're doing. We're directing them on how to operate that team, what the goals ought to be, and how to do this with an interaction between Point Next and engineering, to ensure that we're getting that same secret sauce embedded into the 3PAR side of HPE InfoSight.
Rod, hold on to the mic because I'm going to ask you another question, and I'm going to warn you not to give too much information because this is being streamed to the world, and we can't reveal restricted information. But we've talked about this idea of autonomous infrastructure. We've announced 3PAR. What's the vision beyond? Nimble's already got it. 3PAR has it. What's the vision beyond what we've talked about here?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and the vision isn't that new. I mean, before we were acquired by HPE, our vision was always to go up the stack for the very reason I talked about. You just can't look at one part of the infrastructure. And for us, we already knew that more than half of the cases we deal with in support have nothing to do with the storage array at all. We're solving problems all day long outside of storage. We take responsibility for that, and we help our customers through that. So going up the stack was imperative. The fact that HPE acquired us is beautiful. They own most of the stack. I mean, it's awesome. So that is a big part of the direction we already had. It just gets accelerated, I think, with the acquisition. So we are, again, we're not revealing anything here, but we are already talking to all of the product lines up that stack in the same way that we've done with 3PAR. 3PAR was the initial one we wanted to tackle because they already had the analytics data. They've been collecting that data since 2002. It was an easy thing to accelerate and join teams between the InfoSight team and the SFRM team to really accelerate development and get out what Vish has already explained. But we're going through engineering team by engineering team to understand, and we have a cookbook that we've developed on what are the sort of the TOI level stuff that the other engineering product lines need to understand about InfoSight. How do you integrate into it? What does Point Next need to do to get on board with supporting such a new infrastructure and a new support model? And then finally, what does product engineering need to do to be able to integrate in a stepwise manner to bring value up the stack with HPE InfoSight? So that is the vision. It hasn't changed. It just gets accelerated and makes it a lot easier now that HPE owns InfoSight.
That's great. So one more question for the panel around the kind of the block-based storage stuff we're talking about. I'm going to turn to Bruce. You've been a 3PAR customer before HPE acquired 3PAR, and so you knew about those all that data that we were already collecting from 3PAR because you were very familiar with how that all operated prior to HPE's acquisition. But maybe let's focus on, we were talking a little bit ago that you now have Synergy in your environment, and you're using Synergy with 3PAR as a composable storage. And I think that's kind of a concept that these guys are starting to hear more about composable infrastructure. Some of them have heard a lot about it. Talk a little bit about you're actually seeing this in real life and how you're using 3PAR with Synergy and the composable nature of 3PAR with Synergy.
Sure. So we look. It comes down to operational sort of concern, and when you look at the business objectives of implementing technology like this, it's really about how can we become more efficient? How can we operate this piece of technology that's largely delivering a commodity? Certainly, it's a race to the bottom on infrastructure as a service. How can we operate that more efficiently, more effectively, but without a term that I use, without milking the asset, without running that hardware for 5 or 7 years. We run a fairly strict 36-month refresh cycle, which means we need to maximize the return on that investment within largely the shortest period of time. And so, if there are operational matters over and above that, whether it be failures you got to cope with, and you don't have any kind of preemptive knowledge that they're going to occur, or in the case now with Synergy and OneView, and the enjoyment we get from that composability, it's about the operational effectiveness. And my CTO said to me just recently, he said, I knew this was going to be quite autonomous, or there would be some good smarts in there, but he was really quite blown away by the fact that he could create the CPGs in 3PAR, go over to OneView and tell it what volumes he wanted and where he wanted them, and then basically go and get a coffee. It was done. So, and he's been on the tools for 20 plus years, and that's a bit of a mind shift, because all of these different screens and different configurations he used to have to deal with are now largely taken care of. And so, that gives rise to a few sort of questions or concerns around full autonomy, if you're going to start giving IT full autonomy. But at the same time, because you've got this system that's not only orchestrating your implementations or your deployments, but it doesn't stop at that point. It also keeps an eye on them. So the whole auditability, the configuration watchdogs, as I call them, they're in play as well to make sure that your configurations don't change. So we're getting these operational efficiencies not only in deployments, but in actual ongoing operation. And this whole composable architecture, the convergence, we're running fully converged, collapsed sort of environments now on the 5900 series switches. And it all just seems to be getting a lot easier. I was certainly a naysayer. I was a bit of a, I'd say, not an advocate for convergence, because I certainly enjoyed the benefit we got from a performance and reliability point of view from discrete systems. And I didn't want to go down the Flex Fabric route. I certainly didn't want to go fully converged. But I've been pleasantly surprised. The sharing of this infrastructure by storage and different facets, and also by Ethernet, actually works. It's fine. There's no real drama. And the speeds now, 25, 50, 100 gigabit, mean that actually these problems largely go away anyway. So look, it's been quite refreshing, this journey. And we're certainly seeing the operational benefits, and therefore the business and financial benefits of what is technology.
Why don't we get Patrick in on this, and then we'll talk a little bit about the data protection and the object and large-scale file and object storage that you're focused on, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So for folks that, I gave a short description of CloudBank, but why don't you give them an idea what we're really talking about with CloudBank?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. One of the themes that we talked about was essentially how do we make life easier for certainly the IT folks that are responsible for keeping the lights on and administrating infrastructure at scale. And one of the things that we embarked on a couple of years ago was this concept of full stack integrated data protection. So we wanted to be able to do a couple of things. We wanted to federate our primary and secondary platforms. We wanted to provide a number of different use cases. So application-based snapshot, rollback, replication for DR and business continuity, backup, and then certainly archiving, right? So a number of different use cases. We wanted to make sure that that was cloud ready, right? And that we were focused for customers specifically on SLAs, RTO and RPO. So with the release of what we call Recovery Manager Central 5.0 and CloudBank, we've actually brought that whole story to the market for our customers. So a couple of things that we've done. So if you're an existing 3PAR customer, we've talked to a lot of customers who are moving away from dedicated backup teams, right? So just a team that's solely dedicated to do backup and recovery. And a number of customers are sort of looking to integrate their stacks more on a vertical basis, right? So when Rod talks about on the info site being able to look, farther up and down the stack, making all those pieces work together better and more efficiently is another way to gain efficiencies. So we wanted to make 3PAR work together with Store Once. So what we can do is we have application plugins for hypervisors, databases, other enterprise apps that let you do all of those availability actions within the UI of those apps. So we have a number of plugins. So for example, we have a vCenter plugin that'll allow you to right-hand click on your on your VM or your data store, and you can do snaps, you can do replication to another 3PAR, you can back them up to store once, and actually now you can actually archive those VMs out to the cloud, right? So we wanted to put the parlance of all the data protection and availability activities in the application admin or the system administrator. So with RMC 5.0, we're actually putting that into the main UI of the 3PAR as well too, right? So when you create your data, so when you provision your vVols and your various capacity virtualization groups, what you can do is essentially apply a number of policies at that point in time that allow you to do all of that, right, from your SSMC UI. Right? So you don't need to break context and go into a separate ISV or a separate store once GUI or a whole bunch of other stuff. That's all done for you automatically. And the last thing that we provided was that we see a number of customers who are moving away from either a second data center or using tape media, for example, and what they want to use is for an archive tier is object is becoming an increasingly popular destination for archival type data, especially archive of backups. So what we provide is the ability to go from on-prem all flash to federated secondary storage, so you get that media break in between the solutions. And then after a period of time, based on policy, you can take those backups and store them out in Azure, or you can store them in Amazon in S3 format or in Azure Blob Storage format. And we actually allow customers to what we call disconnect those backups. And when we use tools to demote that storage to Glacier, for example, or Blob Archive, where you get actually the lowest cost tier. So it really gives you a very simple way from either the application or the main your main storage UI to manage that whole entire life cycle. Primary all flash, copies on your secondary system, out to the cloud, and then we also manage the whole life cycle back in the case of restores or availability concerns. So there's a lot of other technology that goes into it. It's very elegant. We can get into some more details, but in essence, what we're trying to provide is integrated data protection. And what you'll see, not to foreshadow too much, but we're working very closely with the Nimble team to provide those type of experiences pretty soon as well. And they have you guys have gone on in the past on your journey of federating all flash with secondary flash array, and then we can further add on some other use cases. So we're really trying to at the very high level HPE making hybrid IT simple for our customers. This is definitely one of the use cases where we're delivering that, and we actually talked about it today. 20th Century Fox using this. We've actually had a number of customers this is one of the main design point, but have used it to avoid ransomware attacks, right? This type of federated data protection. We talked about that on stage today with a customer example. So pretty cool stuff in that integrated data protection world.
So I'm going to ask one more question of you. You kind of kicked tape under the table a little bit and said, everybody's moving away from tape, but we just launched LTO 8, and people are still using tape. So what are the types of customers that are still using tape? So just to be clear, LTO 8 was just launched about a month ago. We're going to have LTO tape and LTO 8 in all of our libraries. So we're not running around saying tape is dead, right?
No, absolutely not. And so what happens is that for an archive tier, the rise of very large form disks using methodologies like erasure encoding is certainly that's getting more popular, right? Object storage APIs as a actual piece of media though that can last for probably 5 to 7x longer than a spinning media, right? Tape is still the cheapest, the most scalable, and from a streaming performance workload, it's very good. I mean, you're talking upwards of 400 or 500 megabytes per second streaming on an LTO 8. Individual tape drive. So it's a very secure medium. So we still have a lot of customers who use that technology, and we have implemented LTO 8 in our high-end tape libraries, and we'll be putting that throughout the rest of the product line throughout the year. So tape is certainly not dead, and we sell a lot of it, and our customers still consume it. It's just a further option in the stratification of media within your enterprise.
I'm just going to hand the mic to Bart, because I know Bart's going to have a question, or Phil will. So between the two of you guys, well, let's open it up to your questions.
Gonna beat it up.
Bart always has questions, so I'll give it to you.
Can I ask the store virtual question or not? Sure. I've seen the first slide, which is really nice, but where's store virtual?
Yep. So Store Virtual is still an option that we have in the portfolio. We have a number of Store Virtual customers that are out there, particularly in the Store Virtual 4000 install base and VSA. So Store Virtual VSA still available for customers who want to use that. We've got a number of solutions that we have with Synergy, for example, that for customers that want a pretty inexpensive way to do one of two use cases, either a cheap iSCSI SAN that has pretty good, strong synchronous replication capabilities. It doesn't have all the features from some of the newer stacks like dedupe and compression, but still works really good for that use case. We have other customers that want to use it for aggregating captive storage on a number of server nodes for server virtualization within VMware. That's still a fairly popular use case. We have it in Synergy. So, and then I don't know if you want to talk about Store Virtual 3200 at all.
Yeah, so we did the Store Virtual 3200 last year. That was a dual controller Store Virtual, right? And that's still being offered. The Store Virtual 4000, now that has reached the sort of end of generation for the 4000 as planned. And so if you're a Store Virtual 4000 customer, you can look at the 3200 as one option. You can look at Nimble and SimpliVity as another option in the portfolio. You can look at 3PAR as well, right? Many Store Virtual customers want to use synchronous replication and transparent failover. That's a key feature.
That's why I ask. So here in Europe, at least, we have a lot of customers with synchronous replication.
Right.
I don't see it in MSA, not in Nimble. Apparently, it's coming, but
so it's there on
not
3PAR and it's coming on Nimble.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's coming on Nimble because I talked to the guys on.
that's why I ask.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
because there is that synchronous replication question.
Correct.
And 3PAR is one step too high
Yes.
for a lot of
Yes.
small and medium customers here in Europe, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think the really important point is to make sure we take care of the customers, right? And helping them migrate their existing solutions, right? We have a lot of VSA customers that talk to me that really like it, service provider customers that are still using it today, and we'll continue to offer Storage till VSA, right? And then as we bring other products into the portfolio, whether it's Nimble, whether it's SimpliVity, again, we'll make sure that's as seamless a migration path as we can offer them.
Okay, thank you. Other question. In the past Discover sessions, always with storage, it was about federation and data mobility between the platforms. There is that Store Virtual with 3PAR, for instance. Are you planning this with Nimble as well?
Absolutely. So this technology we introduced last Discover was Pure Copy.
Yes.
We talked about 3PAR and Store Virtual. Pure Copy is being looked at 3PAR and Nimble now, next. So that's on the roadmap.
That's on the roadmap as well. Okay.
Okay.
So I guess the first is more of a clarification. You talked about assembling the same Nimble support team, Nimble-like support team for 3PAR. Can we expect that level 1, level 2 goes away for 3PAR and we're going directly to level 3 in the future?
Okay, so today we do have level 1, level 2 support for 3PAR support. I think, to me, the first important step would be the 3PAR base continues to grow, right? Install base is very, very large. How do we ensure we can scale, right, the support organization to be more effective as the problems get more and more complex across the stack, right? Will we eventually get to where it's straight to L3? I think eventually, but it's going to be a journey, right? And I think we can do a lot just to even make L1 and L2 more effective, right? Case automation, case log automation, faster resolution. And I think the other key thing as well is bringing that peak team to really help enable the support organization on how they do better predictive analytics on support.
Yes, I would just echo that. I mean, that is exactly what the peak team is responsible for, is how do you automate some of those more difficult issues and how do you prevent bad things from happening in a 3-part context, but also how do you start eliminating those level 1, level 2 cases that are going in the manual manner today. How do you automate those end-to-end with resolutions back to the customer? So that is absolutely being worked on today. Like, when will it actually eliminate all of level 1 and level 2? As Vish said, that's a journey. I mean, we always did it because when we first came out, we were automating from day one. So we didn't have the issue. But to go back in time and sort of cover everything, it's a journey. But that is exactly the road we're on, is to really get that level 1, level 2 automation in place.
So the other thing I wanted to ask about was SimpliVity, and where does that integrate with the storage portfolio? Because a lot of what they bring to the table is data fabric software.
So we talked a little bit about, so there's a couple different areas of integration you can take a look at, right? So it's either on the data services side in mobility, right? Or in general automation, right, as well. So you can basically have a similar experience from a workload perspective in terms of how you go automate that. And some of it's more appropriate for a 3-tiered architecture. Some of it's, some workloads are great for HCI. So on the data mobility side, we are taking a look at how we can essentially make workloads more portable between those two separate architectures. They have a lot of similarities in the way that they approach some of the things that I even talked about, integrated data protection, right? They do a lot with mobility and similar concepts to what we have with, peer copy and peer persistence and the way that they move VMs around. And so there's a lot of things that we're taking a look at when we talked a little bit about peer copy in terms of how do we federate between heterogeneous external storage architectures like 3PAR and Nimble. The same things apply to SimpliVity, and we actually have some proof of concepts going on with that as well. And it uses, as an underlying technology, it uses RMC to do that. So it's based on snapshots, and you can move workloads effectively either at the LUN level, the file level, or the the VM level between those type of workloads. On the other, and as well too, that they're looking at, they have a very high desire to integrate themselves with the InfoSight team. I know you guys have talked to them, quite a bit as to how they can, use these typical scenarios. Because when you take a look at some of the things that we applied on 3PAR for InfoSight with VM Vision and all the things that come with that, latency, heat maps, capacity utilization, that stuff is like absolutely, applicable to SimpliVity, especially with, for them, especially where data locality is a key, in their architecture. So I think there's a lot of stuff. Rod and InfoSight are the prettiest girl at the dance right now. So you guys got a very full dance card. So we're trying to figure out how fast we can do that, and what's going to impact the customers the most right off the bat.
Bruce had a comment.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to comment on sort of how excited we are that that's going to be coming to 3PAR. And obviously, I don't think the HPE legal team even know I exist, so hopefully I can say whatever I like. But basically, it says customer, so yeah, I'm always right. So no, we had 3PAR from pretty early on, and one of the things that was quite exciting about that, and people in Vish's team, used to ring us and say, hey, you're running your nearline tier at about 200 IOPS per disk, and it's rated for about 85. That's showing up red on my screen. Can you tell me why? And we say, well, yeah, we're sort of maximizing the use of the asset. And it seemed, so we kind of missed, as not everything scales, and we kind of missed those conversations. Not that they were good conversations, because we had to kind of do something about it, but we kind of miss those conversations when you think about how complex this stuff gets, and we don't always have the answers within our own team. InfoSight obviously is by and large part of the answer to that, because you can't scale without automation. And the automation, what used to be people in your team, is now by and large software. And so we're looking forward to that coming back to the party, because that's the sort of information that can help us uphold our own promises. We have two key promises in our brand values. One of them is performance, and the other one's reliability. They kind of go hand in hand. And if we can't see what's happening, if we don't know there's a corner and we've got to slow down, and if we don't know that there's a bump in the road and we've got to avoid it, then we can come unstuck pretty quickly.
Thank you, Bruce.
I think it's on. Already.
InfoSight, cloud-based analytics platform. So I imagine the longer it's collecting data for, the more accurate it becomes. So with that transitioning to 3PAR, when you turn that switch and the first 3PARs start reporting home, how long does it take for that data to be meaningful? And is that in terms of time or a proportion of the install base that would need to be reporting back?
Can I answer that? No, it's just something I heard. So I was talking with Dave Vellante yesterday from theCUBE, and he's out there telling me how, like several years ago, Vish sent him a bunch of data after 3PAR had launched thin provisioning. And he said it was so easy to look through this data and we could see, wow, these guys were just like blowing it away with in terms of the efficiency of the array. So the data's there, right? It's not like we don't have the data. It's not like we haven't collected it. It's just we haven't had the data scientists, and the info site is a tool to take that data and do something with it.
Yeah, the data's all there, and I think the Calvin's right. You know, the emphasis on making that data consumable to the end user. I think we've used it for internal analysis. We've used it for support to some extent. Making it at the fingertips of customers is where we're going there. And Richard, you're right. That data is there. You turn it on, and you can start already seeing those insights. We just have to make it consumable now for the customer, right? And Rod, you want to add to that? I mean,
well, I guess the only thing I would add is that it's Bill Philbin, if you know him, when we're talking to other product lines, Bill's very clear. It's not like we're just spraying magic dust on your product and all of a sudden it's InfoSight ready and working just like InfoSight for Nimble does. All right, blog that one. So, I mean, you guys understand that. So there's a lot of, when we talk about this AI predictive analytics engine that we have, recommendation engine, the way we build those models is in such a manner where there's a lot of variables involved in sort of the way the models are built so that they can be applicable with other products and other objects and so on to understand performance issues up the stack and so on. We purposely built it that way so that we can extend it to other objects as we get that information up the stack. So 3PAR will fit in there nicely, but it will take work. I mean, we have to train those models with the data that we get from the install base from 3PAR for it to be effective. So we already have a list of several sort of areas of what I would almost call L4 kind of issues in 3PAR that we know of, that we've experienced in the past. Those are the first things we're tackling to add into that predictive analytics with InfoSight.
So in terms of future development, obviously you're optimizing what you've got now, but I think you're kind of hinting at the if future hardware had additional sort of sensors in it, you would be able to gather an even more rich. Is that a fair comment? That's
a very fair comment. Yep, and so we do that all the time with Nimble. I mean, it's been in our sort of DNA right from day zero. I mean, when we released Nimble initially, there was something in the order of about 4,000 sensors in the software. That grows with every release. The input for that is just comes from two places. One is the data scientist asking the engineers to make sure you do this when you create this kind of feature. And then also just from the way we develop the features, it's a requirement before you can submit code to make sure there's appropriate sensors. So, and again, 3PAR was very similar in that regard. There's lots of sensors already there. There's some that we know we would like the 3PAR engineering team to add, and we've asked them to do that already. So.
Yeah, if I can add another way to think about it, you think about an x-axis and a y-axis, right? So the x-axis is adding more platforms, but the y-axis for InfoSight 2 continues to drive additional things. You heard this morning, let's talk about the recommendation engine, right? And what more functionality can we add to InfoSight as well to make it, continue to offer interesting insights?
About InfoSight with Nimble, I heard last year it's a big Vertica database, which was a certain amount, it was a huge amount of petabytes of data and so on. Now with all those 3PARs in this world, how scalable is that database? Because I can imagine that also simplicity and synergy and all those MSAs in the world will go into that database.
It's a great question. So when we first decided that we were going to work with 3PAR as the initial one to bring into this fold, as Vish said, we developed 3PAR for InfoSight in very short order. But when we got acquired, I think the announcement was maybe in March or something like that. But real work can't begin at that point. What has to happen is this date that's called Employee Day 1. Okay, so that was the date that we got our badges, we got our HPE email addresses, we got our pizza lunches taken away. So that was an historic date. I got screwed up with the HPE network and our network trying to work together. So anyway, that's a big milestone date when that happens. That was when we were able to start working with the engineering teams, okay, and share information in depth and so on. And that's when we embarked on the 3PAR one. And so that was less than 6 months to get HPE InfoSight working for 3PAR. And why was that? Well, we brought a lot to the table, obviously. We had InfoSight, but HPE already had SFRM. They already had a large engineering team on that. They already had some outstanding data architects. So we knew that that Vertica database, even before we were acquired, was something we were going to go change out for a different kind of back-end data platform. It turns out what 3PAR already had was exactly what we wanted. So not only did they get synergy of HPE or InfoSight coming into 3PAR, but they already had the back-end data platform we wanted. That's what we're moving to. So when you see HPE InfoSight for 3PAR, it's running on the new back-end platform. The Nimble is not yet, but it will. So there was a ton of synergies on engineering resources. We combined all those resources. They're all in my team now. It's all one team that is now InfoSight on Nimble and what the SFRM team was. So I mean, it's a classic case of what you want to exactly happen when you acquire a company is getting that kind of synergy. So we're a bigger organization now. We're much better at many things with acquiring the data platform team, and we're much faster at developing.
So that means that the Nimble information also will go into that storefront remote.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it storefront remote. It's really that new data backend pipeline architecture and platform that we'll be using. So yes, it will. Yeah. It will at some point. So that's a big change for us. There's certain things that will still be retained. So Vertica is very good at doing some very large scale analytics. So some data will live in both places, but everything that we need for the portal and for the way we're doing real time ingest and analytics on things that we want to move to, that will all be in that new platform. Absolutely.
I can go on if you want.
Let's see if anybody else does,
Yeah,
but if not,
there you
you're
go.
more than happy because you ask good questions. Anybody else have a question you want to throw out there? Hey, go for it, Bart.
It's all about experience, as you see, OneSphere now, multi-cloud, whatever, something. The upgrade experience of Nimble is simple. In theory, the 3PAR experience is also simple. In reality, it's not really the case. Are you planning as well that the 3PAR experience will move to a Nimble upgrade experience with one click and bang, there you go?
Yeah, so you're right. One of the early hallmarks of 3PAR was simplicity, right? And I think over time, we've recognized that the upgrade experience has become a little more complex, right? And I think it's just over time, all of the different elements and different evolutions of the feature set. So there is actually a very strong initiative in place. In HP, the internal term is called CSU, which stands for Customer Self-Upgrade. Now today, it's Customer Self-Upgrade optional. We're moving to Customer Self-Upgrade mandatory, okay, which then would say for you to be able to hit that bar, you really have to make it simple. You really have to do a lot of different things here on the upgrade process. Not only is there a simplification element to it, there's also a time element to it and how long it takes to go do it, right? So both those elements are being very actively looked at. Okay, and I'm actually actively working that project right now.
And I'm not actively working it, but the team that's done those videos, they gave them to me, and they want me to start promoting the customer self upgrade stuff. So I actually probably have the link, and because it's on a public URL, I'm happy to share it with you to have a look.
So I want to be a beta tester.
Yeah, so the other aspect of that, which you may know from Nimble, is obviously we do have that very simple update experience. So it is a 2-button click. One, when you're on Nimble and you go to the software page where you want to do a software update on the Nimble array and you're in the admin user interface, you'll see a list of available software releases that you can download. You click on one of those and then you basically apply it. But the list that you actually see there is entirely governed by InfoSight. Okay, it's not arbitrary. What you see there is what we feel is the best releases for your system that are not going to cause you issues. So in other words, if we know of an issue in a version of Nimble OS that could get exposed when it runs in your environment, we don't let you update to that. We let you update to a release that doesn't have that issue happening or has a fix for it. And so that's another component of what we want to make sure 3PAR does as well. is that sort of that supportability feature whereby the only thing you can download is a release that we have judged as being appropriate and going to work for you in your environment.
I almost said Nimble Cloud Volumes, but I now see on the slide HPE Cloud Volumes. So a question on that. Could you first of all tell us the kind of use cases that live customers are using that for? And secondly, do you think you could become a victim of your own success in this, in that if it does become a successful product, the cloud companies themselves are going to jump all over it and almost eliminate that need with their own block storage solutions?
Okay, so I guess if you look at block storage, right? Block storage in the cloud, if you look at that narrower use case, I think you'll find that it's really hard to get things like 6 nines availability, data services, clear SLAs for performance, right? Those are hard things to come with something like EBS, data compaction. And so what HPE Cloud Volumes, that he was talking about, Nimble Cloud Volumes, offers you is those levels of service in the cloud, right? Also, your ability to move data between clouds becomes difficult today in the public cloud, right? Especially as you take data out. So a lot of the cloud, from when I look at it today, has been designed with compute in mind. And I think storage is data is gravity, right? And so some of the same concepts that apply to compute don't so easily apply to storage. So the ability, again, to offer those same level of data services, those SLAs, those performance things, allow you to move data in and out easily, are the key things that HPE Cloud Volumes will bring.
And there is, if you didn't see it, the Cloud Volume booth is over there. It's like in fact, all the storage demos are like between 605 and 610, I think, are where most of the demos are. And there's a Cloud Volume demo there. The one thing I'm not sure you're aware of is that Nimble Cloud, or HPE Cloud Volume, isn't sitting like in an Amazon data center. It's co-located close to a data center so that the latency between somebody wanting to run compute with Amazon is acceptable with the distance that it is from an HPE Cloud Volume.
And
so
it is sold as a service, right? It is not sold as you buying Nimble Storage. It's sold as a service. You buy X amount of capacity through a cloud-based portal.
And one thing to be clear too is it's only in the U.S. right now because there just hasn't been enough interest in, with the diversity of locations in Europe. They're not doing it here. They're trying to figure out how to get their business model to move HPE Cloud Volumes to Europe.
And conceptually, it's a model that we've had a lot of customers ask us to apply to other workloads as well. So if you think about block storage in HPE Cloud Volumes, and then you take that same model, but you apply it to unstructured data, almost like the data that we're streaming in for InfoSight from our telemetry. We have a number of customers that say, can you provide that to me? I'm bringing in a ton of unstructured data, whether it be file or object, or even Hadoop, HDFS type of data, and I want to apply compute to it in the public cloud, whether it's Lambda or doing MapReduce type of activities. So I can keep the data where it is. I have provenance over it, but I can apply compute to it in an elastic manner is another model that we're considering, because essentially, moving that much data is very, very difficult. And so it's not only a technology piece, but it's a business model as well. So I think that the HPE Cloud Volumes as an architecture and a concept has a lot of applicability to other workloads as well that we're investigating. So you should watch out for some things in that area.
Definitely worth dropping by the booth and seeing the demo and understanding the architecture of how we're doing it. It's very, very slick and very simple to use.
But I think to your main question though was, are we worried about that? I think what we found is that, and I was talking to a couple of folks we made an acquisition on the services side a couple of months ago. They're a firm called Cloud Technology Partners, CTP. Is that it's almost like a reverse thinking that, sure, some of that data is going to go into the cloud. We know that, and that's what's going to happen. But you have to embrace that, and you have to make it easier for customers. So if you lower the barrier of exit, I think customers tend to gravitate towards solutions that help them, in that manner. So you have to embrace that piece of it, and then you come up with new concepts. You find new concepts like cloud volumes, right? Essentially, at the end of the day. So I think we're embracing it. We've got a number of products in the portfolio between Cloud Bank, Cloud Volumes. We'll be introducing some more stuff as we go into the calendar year next year that are hybrid IT use cases for storage. So we're embracing it, and I think our customers are as well too.
So one last question, il mio fratello Ernesto.
Ciao. In regards to HPE InfoSight, the customer path, it's available now. What's the customer path to upgrade? Is there anything special they need to do in order to get it available on their 3PAR? One. And second question, is there a SKU or a charge for this type of service?
Okay, so InfoSight is like love, fresh air, and sunshine. It's free for all customers with an active support contract. What do you do to get it? So again, if you're a 3PAR customer today with support contract and with a remote connection back, you will have access to HPE InfoSight. To get the cross-stack analytics, where you can look at it in VMware environments across hosts and storage and network, you will need 3PAR OS 3.3.1 and Service Processor 5.03. You'll need that combination to get some of the advanced analytics that Rod talked about, right?
He said it was the last question.
It's a 5-second question. Tripwire is yellow, Nimble is green. What will be the next color?
Not orange.
Blue. Simplicity is blue.
Simplicity is blue.
Simplicity is blue, that's right.
Max
HPE
Vanilla.
logo is green, so something whatever.
There you go. Maybe we'll get some votes from all of you guys. Give us some color submissions.
Thank you, guys.
Okay,
you.
I definitely thank you guys for coming. Bruce, thanks for just like spur of the moment dropping in. Really appreciate you coming in. Thanks, everyone. And next session is what? Is it like 5? It's 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock is the software-defined and cloud group, Rick Lewis, where you'll probably, I'm guessing, you'll hear a lot more about OneSphere.